I'm really glad we could share that song today. It's been a kind of an anthem of hope for me for a few years. And I could imagine singing it in your lovely, lovely sanctuary. I love that we can see the stained glass windows. It's been a while since I was in it, longer than you've not been in it, but someday we'll be back in that sanctuary. But I suspect I'm not the only person here whose fears for the future and despair over our present sometimes immobilize me, and I need the sky or a song to shake me loose. If you too find yourself immobilized, however it happens, on Netflix, on Facebook, in bed, I hope you realize it's a perfectly reasonable response to what's happening all around us. When our nervous systems are activated by danger, we shift first to flight, and if flight doesn't work, to fight. And if we cannot fight, or the danger is overwhelming or life-threatening, to freeze. Our most primitive branch of our autonomic nervous system slows us down, shuts us down. The last 10 years or so have brought tremendous new insights into trauma and trauma treatment. And if trauma isn't something you think about personally or professionally, you might know very little about this new thinking or think that it has nothing to do with you. If it didn't have anything to do with you before, say November 2016, or before the 2018 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, or before you heard the word COVID, or before January 6th, I'm pretty sure it does now. All of our present lives and well-being are threatened by a pandemic, our future by catastrophic climate change. This is trauma. Our siblings of color continue to be traumatized by racism and colonialism as they have for more than 400 years. And for any of you with personal trauma, yes, this collective trauma layers on your own trauma, deepening the impact. If we look at this trauma activation cycle in a mammal with a healthy nervous system, something surprises them, their body orients to the danger, they flee or they fight or they freeze. And then after the danger passes, the nervous system completes this activation and releases the charge, maybe shaking or in a human crying, before gradually moving back to a typical healthy nervous system state. But this isn't so simple when the traumatic stress is ongoing. When we can't flee or fight climate change or feel powerless to protect our families in a pandemic, or our bodies had earlier trauma, especially if we don't have space to discharge that activation, then the fight, flight energy and shutdown energy builds up and is literally stuck in our bodies. We often stay shut down or often panicky, and sometimes we ricochet between the two. Numb, panicky, numb, panicky. So just to encourage you to keep moving towards that safe state, I invite you to go back to some of the things we tried during the Time for All Ages. Check in with your feet. Notice your breathing. It might have changed when I mentioned some of the things in our world. Notice the beauty and coziness of your home. Notice that you're safe here. When we consciously notice how we feel inside, while consciously taking in our environment, it helps our frazzled nervous systems realize we're safe. And that's what we need to discharge some of that stuck stuff. Mostly we only discharge a little bit at a time. That's fine, even healthier, better than like some torrent of everything. It could just be a sigh or a shiver, a tear. I often yawn. It's not even important to know what it was. It could just have been a tense conversation with someone we haven't let go of yet. And just, it's the only time I'm going to fall into the geek mode of this, but if anybody knows about polyvagal theory and wants to be available to this community, would you just type your name in the chat? I just named a whole bunch of stuff that usually some people want to know more about. You could also send me an email. I've got some great beginner level resources, but if there's someone here who wants to be a resource on polyvagal theory, please make yourself known. But I go into that because I think that right now we all need to know this very basic level. We all have a body, we're all experiencing trauma. We all need to know something about helping ourselves and each other move through that. We're collectively at a painfully terrifying juncture of human history. We were before 2020, with marginalized communities already impacted and most threatened, and now months of pandemic impacting those most medically, economically, and socially vulnerable, bringing all of us traumatizing stress compounded by isolation. I know we're all living for the other side of this pandemic, and yet we'll be wearing masks and being very careful, possibly another year, even with adults being vaccinated now, because vaccines for children are further out. And on the other side, the impacts are going to continue, from economics to education to post-COVID syndrome. And we will still be living in a stew of racism, police brutality, inequality, accelerating catastrophic climate change. So I don't want us living for the other side of the pandemic and trying to return to normal. Taking seriously the ways our world is threatened needs to upend how we do church and ministry, because all of these threaten our lives and make us feel powerless. We are not powerless. We absolutely do have the power to make a difference in the well-being of ourselves and our community in the face of this onslaught. But when we are shut down or panicked, we stay powerless. As UUA regional staff, I am asked a lot of questions. Often people hope with some new techniques and maybe a little coaching, they'll be able to solve the problems facing them. Sometimes this is true, and I end my day feeling useful and helpful. But there's a particular thread of these questions in the last few years that is anything but simple: volunteers and leadership. In fact, this entire sermon comes from this question. The question, of course, varies. It's not always exactly the same. It's harder to recruit RE teachers. What should we do? How do we do leadership development? What we used to do is not working. We know what we need to get done, but no one seems to have the energy to do it. We can't find a board chair. We can't find committee chairs. It used to be we ran our churches on the labor of stay-at-home 1950s and 60s wives. And then we ran on retiree labor. And then retirement shifted. And now, as all American workers work longer and longer hours, whether on multiple hourly jobs, whose schedule is often entirely unpredictable, or the great speed up of many salaried jobs where we all work harder for the same pay, many of us are already stretched very thin time-wise. So before 2016, I had answers about assessing what was really needed, reducing unneeded meetings, and creative ways to get tasks done. But now I want to call for a complete overhaul, because it's not just that we're overworked and don't have enough time, don't even have enough time with our families sometimes. It's that many of us are overwhelmed and shut down in the face of all that is facing us. Our nervous systems just aren't designed for this. The magnitude of change needed globally is itself overwhelming. Beyond, the current situation with our government and hoping that we can get some stability in terms of democracy, we know we need lives with far less stuff. We need less energy use, dramatically more equitable sharing of resources. One of the ways to describe such a path is the degrowth movement. Degrowth, envisioning a world where we each work less and have less material stuff, but also more time to grow and cook our own food, to spend making art and music and helping our community. This kind of beginning of a sketch of a shift towards a world that we could survive and change and adapt and prevent catastrophic climate change is hopeful, but the shifts aren't guaranteed. Right now, we're watching how increased traumatic stress, illness and economic, is laying bare the reality that many act like and have been saying out loud recently that they only care about themselves and their family, only what's good for their kid, only what's good for their business. Partly this is toxic individualism and white supremacy culture, but also sustained traumatic stress can lead to unraveling connection as many hunker down, overwhelmed in the face of all that threatens them and their family. Weaving the connection and community resilience that we need in the face of sustained traumatic stress will take time, commitment, and sharing resources. But when I start thinking about the shifts I need to make in my life, I feel overwhelmed. I'm sure many of you do. It can feel especially overwhelming when we don't have any time because we're caught in the rat race of the current economy, overwhelmed at work and at home, needing to have our jobs to pay our debts. But leadership is already coming from those most impacted. If you need a place to start on this kind of shift, start with Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass for her botanical and Potawatomi wisdom on how to live now, and with Adrienne Maree Brown's podcast, How to Survive the Apocalypse. And if you take what you learn humbly to find connections with communities locally, I think you'll find the shifts already in motion. Maybe you already know where they are. Everywhere I've looked, I find these shifts starting. So it's precisely for me in this connection between the change needed, our overwhelmed bodies, and this lack of volunteers and leadership that people keep bringing me, that I think that we have the biggest opportunity to thrive now with a new way of being church, way of being church for today, for the shifts needed now, not a way of being church for the past. Adrienne Maree Brown talks about small is good, small is all. What she means is the large is a reflection of the small, or the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So I wonder, what if the way we are together at church is our safe experimental place to begin new ways or reclaimed ways of being human together? Because our UU congregations are very good at certain things. I mean, things like running the complex fundraiser, making sure committee roles are filled, reviewing our bylaws, being sure the order of service is free from typos, and now that Zoom worship minimizes tech glitches. What if it's time to leave this normal behind, to stop pressuring our volunteer and professional leadership to center this kind of task? I just mean to sketch that kind of task, not only those specifically. What if instead we centered caring for each other at the level that helps each of us continually heal from impacts? What if, because we are part of this kind of religious community and we're discharging our nervous systems more often, which is more easily done together with people than at home, isolated by ourselves? What if, because of this discharge, we're more free from the immobilizing impacts of the world because we're moving through them together? What if, because we're more free, we're more able to see possibilities? What if by shifting, letting go of the perfectionism, the urgency, the unnecessary tasks, we are learning the skills to join with the changes already in motion? So here's a list of some of the things I think that would create a community that builds this kind of resilience. Imagine a church where these things happen all the time, even at board meetings. Listen to bodies. Take time to check in with bodies. Center care of bodies in food and comfort and protection. Let bodies move, sigh, cry. Create space where we can be really real with each other, where we don't need to pretend we're okay, or we're not despondent. If we tend to skate on the surface most of the time, that will take some conscious time and space to get real. Keep ourselves and each other company with the reality of these feelings. This is also what our children and teens need most from us. They're aware of the impending climate crisis. They too are carrying the pandemic and the traumatizing stress in their bodies. And we can't reassure them that everything is going to be okay. What they need is for us to be present. And we can't really be present if we haven't felt our own feelings. Make music and art together. Dance. I know we're all missing the singing together because we literally need it. We will sing again. There's a reason art, music, and dance have kept so many communities going in the face of unimaginable oppression. Music and art help us release trauma. Play together. Play engages us in the safe, socially connected nervous system. Build trust. Adrienne Maree Brown says, move at the speed of trust. What I've learned by using this is sometimes we move much slower. We need to. We're not ready, and that can be super frustrating. And then often, as the trust builds, suddenly we move faster with less effort and time. Do something to help, even small things. Feeling like we have some power to make a positive difference is crucial to breaking out of the powerless place. Experiment and keep breaking out of our habitual ways of being and thinking. See ourselves as an experiment in a new or reclaimed way of being human together. Share hope. We don't always need the latest depressing news episode, but we do need to hear where we're each finding hope, where we see that new possibility breaking through in the world. If small is all, could we do church this way? Center these things first, not just some of the time, but all the time. Listen to bodies, make room for what's real, keep each other company, make music and art together, play, move at the speed of trust, do something, share hope, and consciously help each other let go and feel safe. You might wonder if we'd get anything done if you start imagining that board or committee meeting doing these things before the agenda. But maybe if we are paying attention to what's most deeply real, we will discover what is most important on the collective task list and be able to let the less important go. And I suspect that we'd find some of our deepest needs are met in such a way by the new task list that they're not tasks, but the way we find meaning, healing, connection, hope, even when the world feels hopeless. I also imagine that if we could get rid of this false dichotomy between ministry and church work, if the meetings are ministry that help all of our bodies, that we will feel energized by being together and ministered to in the work, rather than needing to go to worship or our small group ministry to be ministered to and then go to our committee meeting to get the work done. Every day for the rest of our lives, we are going to face the choice to hunker down, disconnect, tend only our families, or to reach out and weave the deeper resilience that we need. Some days we will need to hunker down and rest. And I pray there will be others where we weave deep resilience together. And I pray that one of the places we do that most is in our communities and congregations. So may it be, blessed be, and amen.